You won't have escaped the news that by a landslide vote, Parliament yesterday voted in favour of an amendment to decriminalise abortion in England and Wales. So in this video, I'd like to tell you a little bit about what it is and, importantly, what it is not. Because this has quite rightly stirred quite a lot of feeling and debate around the country and social media. This video is not to give you my opinion nor to tell you what to think, but it is to talk about how important and how serious this is. Well, first of all, please do subscribe to the channel if you like my independent approach to these things. But as you can see here, you can see the block of red. So en masse, pretty much Labour pushed this through by a landslide of 379 to 137. Now, out of whom you can see that the vast majority of the no's are Conservative, but we did have 8 Conservative voted in favour, but we also had 25 Labour vote against. And that was essentially because they were told to have a free vote, apparently, to just vote with their feelings on this one. But as you can see, a landslide in favour of that amendment. Now, the important distinction of what this is not is, well, first of all, it is not yet law. That's because it hasn't finished yet. So the pathway of this bill, the crime and policing bill, which in itself I think deserves a little bit of pause and explanation, because I'll echo some of the thoughts that I've seen more than one person say this online, that this really ought to have been a separate law in and of itself. It should have been a full-on debate. It should have been completely separate, not sort of squeezed in, if you like, as an amendment to the crime and policing bill. Albeit that's where we are now. I do echo the thoughts of a lot of people that it should at the very least have been a separate thing, but it isn't. It's squeezed in with the crime and policing bill. But it is not yet law, because we had the report stage, which was yesterday, and those votes were held yesterday. We then have the third reading in the House of Commons. Then it moves to the House of Lords. Now, we may well have a lot of change around in the House of Lords. Some people have said that because of the support that it's had so far in the House of Commons, maybe that this won't change anything, but you never know. This may actually change drastically once it gets to the House of Lords. But it is not yet law. So I wanted to make that absolutely clear, because with great respect, not everybody understands how this works and takes the time to. This is sort of the, if not A-level, the first year of a law degree, that you would learn the process of a bill and how the law is created and so on. But so that's the first thing. It is not yet law, and it will be some time before it is, if that is the case. If it does go through all the same processes with the House of Lords, then you get parliamentary ping pong back and forth. And if all's said and done, this amendment stays in, then that becomes law. But I will go with the way Sky News has reported on this. Fairly neutrally, I'll tell you that I'm being neutral in it. I'll go with the way that they've put it in the headline, in that they voted to decriminalise abortion rather than legalise it, and rather than make it legal, as I've seen people say today. And there's an important distinction there, because the decriminalisation is, and I'm going to give you a balanced view, some of the arguments for, some of the arguments against, just so that you have those arguments. You may very well not agree with any of these arguments for, but I'll tell you what they are nonetheless. The primary argument in favour of this is that it is aimed at the very narrow circumstances where women are in such a difficult position. This is a hugely difficult choice to make, and the circumstances that they've got there, maybe that they've got there by rape or something else, some horrendous circumstance, that they absolutely feel that they have no choice but to go through with this. And if they do it beyond the 24 weeks, then they are criminalised for it. And the criminal punishment for it is life imprisonment. That is the predominant argument for, in that there are some circumstances that this is absolutely horrendous and they have absolutely no choice. And to criminalise them, in the view of many, is wrong. But quite obviously, the big problem that a lot of people have with this amendment is that it decriminalises these terminations at any stage, which to, I think, most people that I've seen, to be fair, today, absolutely cannot accept that we should support as a society. This is me reflecting on the comments that I've read. And admittedly, I've seen one or two that do speak in favour, but the vast majority that I've seen today are absolutely against this amendment, which does beg the question as to why it was such a landslide in favour of the amendment, predominantly by Labour and Liberal Democrats and the Greens. Make of that what you will. There's been a lot of comment on that. I don't need to add mine to that. If you do want my independent commentary, do subscribe to my Off the Record channel, where I may air some views on that. You can subscribe to that down below. As I said, the main problem with this is, in the eyes of many, is that it will allow this to happen at any stage, which many people feel that is just inherently wrong as a society to accept. But with all that said, there is still some explanation as to what it is and what it is not. So let's start with what it is. What was this vote of this amendment for? Well, as I said, it's the decriminalisation for women who terminate their own pregnancies, but at any stage. So effectively criminalising doing it themselves. Now, the amendment has largely been brought about due to the prosecutions being brought under the Offences Against the Person Act of 1861, which criminalises even inducing a miscarriage with a maximum of life imprisonment. Over the last 5 years, the police have investigated over 100 women of suspected illegal abortions, including cases involving miscarriages, etc., and 6 women have faced court charges in the last 3 years. It's also been brought about, as I mentioned, for the protection of vulnerable women. The amendment claims to protect women, particularly those vulnerable, such as victims of DA, teenagers, those with mental health issues, or otherwise protecting them from investigation, arrest, prosecution, imprisonment for doing it themselves. There's been some high-profile cases which I'll not go through in this video. And finally, as I said, it was set to be a free vote, so MPs were free to vote however they feel in their personal choice, rather than being told what to, or whipped to tell them what to vote in that vote. Now, let's look at what it is not, because I think there is a bit of a misunderstanding here as to what it is versus what it's not. What it is not is a change in the rules for abortion services. Now, this does not amend, whilst it decriminalises the women involved in it, it does not alter the legal framework for the services under the Abortion Act itself. So the 24-week time limit for the vast majority will still be in place. The requirement for 2 doctors' approval to sign off will still be in place. The grounds sought that they seek to rely upon will still be in place, such as there needs to be a physical risk or mental health risk or something else. It does not decriminalise this practice for any medical practitioner or anyone else for that matter, or the general penalising of anybody getting involved with this who assist in this process outside of the legal framework. It only focuses on decriminalising the women themselves, essentially doing it themselves. Now, obviously, just because there is a framework of all of that I've just explained, that doesn't mean that some people won't bend the rules, abuse the rules, twist the system, and essentially, for want of a better phrase, get away with it and somehow make it happen outside of the intended framework. That will always happen with any kind of laws, and arguably that already happens now. And that is one of the arguments that people have used to put this forward. But because the framework is still in place, it does not, therefore, at least in theory, you understand, as I'm explaining it to you, it does not in theory remove all oversight and such critics that have said that this could lead to just demanding at any stage. But this has some criticism because the framework will remain in place and therefore the criminal liability will remain for others, and it's only removing that liability for the women involved. But of course, as with anything else, this can be open to abuse. Rules can be bent and abused to essentially allow people to do what they wish to do. But of course, as we know, with any framework, some people do try to bend and twist the rules to get around that oversight, around the framework that is supposed to remain in place, and ultimately get what they want anyway. But as I mentioned, some laws do remain in place for other people involved, be those medical professionals or husbands, partners, and so on, or anybody for that matter who may assist. Section 59 of the Offences Against the Person Act makes it still an offence to unlawfully and knowingly procure or supply any poison or other noxious thing or an instrument knowing that it's intended to be unlawfully used to procure a miscarriage. And so the penalty for that is 5 years. And then section 23 makes it an offence to unlawfully and maliciously to administer or cause to be administered or taken, etc. So these offences remain in place because, of course, as I mentioned, the framework with the doctors, the sign-off by at least 2 doctors will remain in place. And if that is not done and someone else has assisted, then they can be prosecuted for assisting in that process. But all that said, this is obviously probably the most divisive issue, divisive topic, and divisive vote that I've ever seen. I think that the vast majority of people, let me know what you think in the comments, I believe the vast majority of people will not see any justification for this whatsoever as a society. Even the in theory arguments that I've put forward in here that have been put forward for this amendment, which may not be held or even recognized by many of you as a valid argument, let me know in the comments what you think, but this is probably the most divisive thing that I've ever seen. Certainly in my lifetime, and we have certainly seen some swooping laws over the last few years. But let me know what you think. That is as best as I can explain it to you, as neutrally as I can explain it to you. It is not yet law. It's still got to go through the House of Lords, and it doesn't remove the legal framework surrounding it, and other people can still be criminalised for it. But that said, let me know your thoughts. Please do subscribe, and I'll see you next time.